To many people, SMPLive is a joyous event filled with friends having a good time, just trying to bring back the glory days of a game not so long forgotten. It had a hand in building up and bringing back many careers within the genre, but also had an equal part to play in destroying quite a few. Behind the forced smiles, social climbing, and righteous moral boasting lay dark undertones still brought up to this day, leaving another permanent scar on Minecraft's already butchered history. In this video, I'm not only going to be going through ArlusFinch's history before and after SMPLive, but also giving you a bit more of an insight into other various personalities you may or may not be familiar with, which I believe are also worth a mention as well. To get a better grip of how ArlusFinch managed to get to the point where his career was about to take off with his friends, we'll have to go back a couple of years to a much simpler time around the commentary community. Many are most likely unaware, but Arlus used to go by the name of Tobazix, something that gets a lot more important later on. For me personally, I wasn't particularly associated with him. I spoke to him here and there in various discords around at the time, but nothing too extensive. He was more known throughout Pyro's friend group, popping up in various videos and streams with him at the time, so it just puts into perspective how long this guy has been around. I'm not too sure why he left that community, but he somehow found himself rebranding to what we know today, which was basically kickstarted by jschlatt's A Tribute to Minecraft. In it, Arlus was basically a side gag throughout the video, sparking up the whole style trend, and gained a fair reputation from doing so. People hopping in his streams, and eventually landing a spot alongside jschlatt into SMPLive. Things started out surprisingly well, but it was only short-lived, as many of the events started to kick off shortly after. The first major kickoff was an altercation between two fairly involved individuals, one obviously being Arlus, and the other Brint. I've invited him on to give his side of the events that took place and give you a better perspective on what happened at the time.
Hi, I'm Brint, brintrevised, and my experience with ArlusFinch was not so much of a good one, I'd say. I'd say we met through mutual friends in 2019. He seemed like an overall good guy, but as I got to know him, I figured that was not the case. Me, him, and others were playing Minecraft one night when my mom called me to come downstairs. Keep in mind, I was about 15 when this happened, and everyone on the call heard my name. They cracked a few jokes about it. It was no big deal. It was only my first name. The only big deal was if my name got out, of course. I was very paranoid during this time. I'm still get a little bit paranoid about things now. And if my name got out, I was worried people would find other information through that name, and they'd try and find more about me. So I was just uncomfortable with my name being out there, even if it was just a first name. But it's simple. If I ask you not to make this info public, you don't. That's just internet etiquette. But I asked everyone there to keep it secret, and of course they all agreed. They were really nice people. Well, except Arlus. Arlus didn't like me replying to his tweets. Every time I made a comment to his tweets, he would say I was riding off of his tweets for clout, even if they were just simple replies. I mean, I literally didn't do anything for clout. I don't know how replying to tweets could get you clout. And when I didn't delete it like he asked, because they were simple replies and really no harm, he made too much of a big deal out of them, he posted my name under the tweet and said, "I'll delete my tweet with your name if you delete your tweet," to blackmail me. He also reported my tweets and got me locked out of my account for 24 hours. He's just not a good person. Like, he literally does not like when I reply to his tweets. A basic Twitter function. But there's a lot of discussion about the word dox. Did Arlus dox me? While he only used my first name, he still leaked personal information, which was not public at the time, which is doxing. It's not even the fact that he doxed me, it's the fact that I repeatedly asked him not to use this info, and he knew it upset me, and he did it to make me do things like delete tweets, or say what I wanted to say about him, or say what I didn't want to say about him. He called me names, he blocked me for a period of time, and he basically treated me like shit, and still used my name up until we released a tweet longer. He harassed my friend yahiamice relentlessly, and sexually harassed minors. Truly an awful person. Anyways, that's my experience with him, and I hope this clears up some miscommunications, because a lot of stuff was being spread about me because of what I said about Arlus. People didn't want to hear what I said, because Arlus had a lot of connections during his time as well. I'm kind of glad that people could see truly the awful human he is now, and I'm kind of glad that he left the internet. Alright, that's all I gotta say. Back to you, Iox.
To write off of Brint there, I had a similar experience with him relatively early on when I joined SMPLive myself. I noticed the similarity between him and Tobrix and said so in the chat. He immediately private messaged me asking me to remove it because he didn't want it associated with his new brand because it had his name attached to it, and immediately jumped to the conclusion that me knowing him was a negative and he might have done something to me. I never found any evidence towards something like that, but it is quite interesting the way he seemed to think so. If anyone does have anything relating to him under the name Tobrix, I'd certainly love to take a look, so feel free to message me on whatever. I'll leave the links in the description. Now going back a little bit, this first main point pretty much was wrapped up with that screenshot. It seems pretty brain dead for Arlus, who was an adult around 20 years old at the time, who was so hellbent on posting a 15-year-old's private info online for basically no reason whatsoever, other than to just be a dick who didn't like it in return. The reaction to this from the server and various members was quite interesting in itself. Antvenom, Sneaksnag, and Krinios were all fairly vocal about their thoughts. Antvenom even decided it would be worth posting this amusing piece of literature.
See, the funny thing about this post is when you choose to be unbiased and not just take the claim at face value, but instead look at the context of the actual images, you'll find that the entire claim is a nothing burger, and that I don't give a shit.
After all that went down, Arlus was also pulled up on quite a lot of tweets he made in the past, which I'll throw up on screen now. Safe to say none of these aged well at all, and thankfully he agreed as well. It still added further fuel to the pre-existing flame built on the previous dramas with both Yahi and Brint, and with the final point coming into play, it all wrapped up into a nice ball of no one wanting him to come back at all. I'm sure some would be willing to make arguments banking on it just being jokes and humor, but realistically with the community he's trying to build an audience from, these kind of things will only be repeatedly brought up as a means to bring him down. With these things happening, the SMPLive server were unsure whether to keep him in or out. Carson didn't particularly step in at any point and just left it to a community vote on whether he should or should not be removed. Within reason, this was pretty stupid if you consider why yahiamice was banned. Personally, I think they saw it as a net loss for themselves, considering a vast majority relied on him and others to make the streams actually entertaining. I'm not going to go listing names, but I think it's fair to say that after the dust settled, the self-sufficient and grounded creators rose to the top, and those heavily reliant on having the community behind the other creators coming to them clearly set them apart from each other. This is reflected pretty consistently with a lack of interaction and massive drop-off as soon as various events came to a close. A number of them even came crawling back to yahiamice after, which we'll go into a bit later in the video. Now, while I do believe the Twitlonger had some clear flaws and incorrect terminology with various things, to just sweep it under the brand of nothing burger and be completely impervious as to why it was made is just pure ignorance. While it's not a career-ending situation, it's incredibly telling of his character, and the level of low this guy's willing to go down towards a literal child just begs the question of morals of those defending this behavior while also sticking to him and supporting him at the same time. He showed you his true colors and you just decided to look away. To go along with this, after not only harassing Brint and mass reporting his account to get his tweet taken down and his account locked, along with him being racist and continuing to attack yahiamice for seemingly no reason, it was a common theme for him to repeat the same story about how Yahi trolled a base on another server that happened a few months earlier. The thing being that it wasn't even his base. He was getting so wound up that yahiamice had griefed someone else's base on another server, and that somehow lived in his head rent-free for nearly half a year. After all this farce created around him, not only was he not kicked from SMPLive, he was also allowed to go onto the next dumpster fire, SMPearth, and continue on his shenanigans there. His habits started consisting of randomly DMing people who he didn't know their age, random sexual shit, and even got advised by one of them not to do it. He said himself that being sexual was part of his humor, but to just randomly DM people shit like this is just desperately sad and just plain creepy. The fourth and main general point that put the final nail in Arlus's coffin was that a lot of people were coming forward about interactions they'd had with him. It was a mix between some of the people who considered him a friend and others who were just fans in general, who had had various interactions with him. They came forward with various accusations, which included him having sexually messaged underage fans and him trying to get NSFW out from minors. All of which is highly inexcusable, even to his own standard, as he later came out with a Twitlonger following the same pattern as the last two, which pointed out by yahiamice. These included a backstory to make whoever reading feel sorry for him, what he's done wrong, something to try and make you feel bad for him, and then a brief promise about how he'll do better next time. After that final Twitlonger, the SMPLive members finally decided to publicly disavow him on their platforms, and Arlus finally dipped from all known social media platforms, although not completely. On Twitter, the only account of his that still seems to exist is the one reserving the @ArlusFinch with over 3k tweets still on it. Other than that, he's completely wiped his Twitch account, deleted his YouTube, and seemingly ceased all activity on his Discord, so hopefully it continues to stay that way. Also just wanted to add on here that while there's a lack of proof, I believe jschlatt also might have had a hand in this situation. I find it hard to believe that he wouldn't, considering how involved he was with the whole Carson situation, who he knew for a much shorter amount of time compared to Arlus, who he had known for quite a while. Moving along a little bit, I think it's safe to say that there's been a lot of controversy surrounding many creators, but specifically there's 3 I want to shine a bit of attention on with this video. Those being Antvenom, Krinios, and stickfab. Other than that, I think there's plenty been said on the other stories that have come out, such as inktea, voiceoverpete, iamspoon, and minilad. Antvenom, as previously mentioned, was one of the first, along with sneakstag and Krinios, to jump in the immediate bandwagon of going against the original twitlonger against Arlus. I think I made my point on that twitlonger pretty clear already, but I just wanted to highlight some of the various points they decided to make about it because clearly the purpose of it completely flew over their heads. Moving on to another one of the 4 horsemen, stickfab. All I can say to start with is this guy's certainly an interesting piece of work, and while he's not a predator or anything like that, I feel bad for anyone who somehow managed to stay friends with this guy. Back when Yahi was taking more of a public approach at trying to get into SMPLive, both him and stickfab were mates. Through stickfab mentioning him to Carson directly, he was then accepted into SMPLive, and not too long after, shit started to hit the fan. Obviously, various events occurred, those mainly including the various creations of Sans and the end trap. Individually, not the worst thing in the world, but I'm sure a case can obviously be made for his removal for not listening to the admins. But on the flip side, as I said earlier, removing someone for over-the-top pranks and then keeping someone in who's pretty consistent with harassment, being racist, and releasing private information, and only giving them what equivalates to a slap on the wrist, it was seriously the wrong move. After he was kicked, the chat devolved quite a few times into a lot of shit talking about Yahi. I think you see where I'm going with this. Stickfab was obviously one of the main offenders. The chat was certainly not pretty, and stickfab had no shortage of input either. It basically revolved around jabs around his humour and his enthusiasm to joining SMPLive before he got added, with stickfab showing off his DMs in the general chat. Overall, it just seemed quite petty, with the majority being unnecessary in my opinion, especially posting a screenshot and blurring him out just comes across as very childish and continues to fuel an unneeded fire. So after that whole saga had unfolded and he ditched Yahi for over 8 months, all the hype around him had virtually disappeared, and he then decided to come sliding right back into his DMs. Never apologised for his behaviour and instead decided to ask for a collab. In that time, Yahi had started doing bits with streaming, his main channel and his second channel, while most of the people who came crawling back to him had pretty much stagnated the entire time. If any general evidence comes into question brought out in this video, I'd be more than happy to share the logs of this server that one of the members has given me. I highly doubt that will be necessary, but it could help put things in chronological order and provide further context on pre-existing situations that have already occurred. If you're looking for any more pre-existing info, feel free to take a look at some of the twitlongers I've put together in the description. It'll certainly help in giving you more context on Arlus and things surrounding that situation. But that's all I've got for you today. I hope you enjoyed, and in conclusion, trolling in a children's game is a crime, so try not to do that. Just wanted to end this by saying thanks to A-Star, Brint, Ailamau, and Yahi for helping with the video, and I hope to see you in the next one.